Yo, SWAC talk. Light on the mic, it's a play. See Wells the guy taking us state to state. Catch us Wednesday, Sunday, stats on the buffet. From gridiron to the court, we got the say. Football spirals, hoop dreams in the chat. Chopping it up, deep dives on every stat. Texas to Florida, repping border to border. Arkansas to Bama, the vibe getting warmer. SWAC talk, keep the knowledge on deck. See Wells spinning, wisdom gotta show respect. Facts flying higher than a wide receiver's check. From football to hoops, what y'all expect? Guests roll through, dropping stories untold. Legends from the SWAC, spitting straight gold. Locker room vibe, secrets unfold. CW heavy like a championship hold. The South's got a rhythm, a culture to match. Each stat, each fact, another door latch. SWAC talk connects like a perfect pass catch. From Alabama skies to Florida's grass patch. SWAC talk, keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday, where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive. Keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive.
All right, everybody, what is going on? Welcome to another edition of For Entertainment Purposes Only. This is the new joint that we're gonna have on Swag Talk. Where we're gonna just do some very amateur um odds and stats and figures, just for fun, man. Don't even go nowhere try to put no money on none of this because it ain't it probably ain't even super accurate, but it's just for fun, man. Just to just to have a little fun. And so today I'm gonna give my early swag championship odds. I mean, obviously, we still got a couple months until the start of the season, and we're gonna have a lot of changes in some of these teams between now and start of fall camp and now and the start of the season. So this is all just guesses, and it's just for fun. So I'm gonna go through these and share my thoughts on why I put a team where I put them. And this is not my predictions for the championship or anything like that. This is just how I see it numerically um, playing out. So with that being said, man, y'all hit those socials: Facebook is Swag Talk, Twitter Swag Talk 76, Instagram Swag Talk. Like the video, comment, and share your thoughts on the video. And also, don't forget to hit that subscription button and the notification bell to be alerted to any video that I drop. Also, we have Swag Smoke coming at you live tomorrow, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. Remember, we're doing Swag Smoke every other Thursday from now until media day, when we start to ramp up to the football season, and we'll start to do it every week again. So just kind of taking a little break here and there. So we're gonna continue to bring y'all what we bring y'all. So with that being said, man, let's go ahead and jump into this for entertainment purposes only, man. Just for fun. I said it and didn't even really put a lot into this, but just wanted to kind of throw some numbers out there, and we'll refine them as we go. But we'll just do things how we do them on here. We always go alphabetical order. So first off is the Alabama A&M Bulldogs. Of course, I gave them a early season win total of 5 games, and that also basically equals out to about 2.5 conference wins. So about 3 conference wins. So you could say a record of 3 and 5 in conference. So that you can figure out where that puts them, probably like 4th place. But I gave them a plus 4,000 odds of winning the championship, which works out to a percentage, probability percentage of 2.4%. So obviously not great, but I mean, it could be a lot worse. This is a team with new coach. They returned some weapons, they added some weapons. Defensively, still, we don't know where they at. in conference play, they draw Prairie View, take Southern and Grambling and out of conference opponents. So you kind of got a decent draw there. You have three conference games on the road, two neutral site games and three home games. So a balanced schedule. Nothing really weighing against them super heavily in conference play. So um, you also have a SWAC game as a non-conference game, but that doesn't factor into this. And even though you're not really factoring in non-conference games, you have a FBS game and an FCS opponent, and then a D2 opponent. So schedule is okay. Um, right now, like I said, I don't have a lot to work with for these guys, so it's always safer to put somebody in this position and let them work their way up the ladder, so to speak. Next up is Bama State. And this is a team that you can probably put them almost anywhere because they lost some very very valuable weapons in the on the defensive side of the ball. They returned some solid special teams guys. They do lose their top return man, but you're getting your day one starting quarterback for last year back, and you're returning the guy who started the last 6 or 7 games at quarterback, and you also have some solid guys in the run game, offense and a decent offensive line. So there is I think Bama State is probably the next level team, next tier team, I would say, in the SWAC East and overall. So I put them at plus 760, which it works out to about 11%. I had them for 8.5 wins on the season, and when you look at conference play, again, they also have a non-conference SWAC opponent and an FBS opponent and two D2 opponents. Um, in conference play, I only have them with one certain loss. So they also have two toss ups in conference play. So they're sitting pretty honestly, um, guaranteed like 4 conference wins. So five conference wins in terms of projection. So this is a team that could win 6 or 7 conference games. Um, depending on how some things shake out. So um, I think if you had to pick a team to be next, I think it's them. They have a lot working in their favor, but they also have some things that make it a question mark for them. But I think they can fill those voids, even if it's just with numbers. They can fill those voids. New defensive coordinator as well. So there are some questions on that side of the ball, but I do think that they're one of those teams that's going to be kind of next in line. In the conference. So after that, we have Alcorn. That's our first West Division team. I had them with a win total of 6. Um, they of course return probably the top running back in the conference right now, and Jacorian Sewell. Um, Questions at quarterback. They replacing some key defensive guys. Um, didn't necessarily have a bad season last season, but didn't also have a great season either. Kind of in the middle, and I think that's kind of what they're going to factor in again. Of course, they have a FBS opponent, um, FCS opponent, a SWAC opponent in non-conference, and then they get Lincoln also. So they open their schedule with 3 straight road games and a neutral site game. So it's honestly possible for this team to kind of take a while to get going, but um, I have them factored in for 2 for sure conference wins and 2 for sure conference losses. Everything else is a toss up. So I think they can be anywhere from you know 3-5 to 5-3, yeah, maybe even 6-2 if some things go right. So I put them at plus 3,200 in the conference. That's like a 3% chance. I think this team can swing higher, but right now I'm not quite sure. They do have some big questions. Quarterback is a concern. Um, and offensive line, I think they kind of need some help at the tackle spots. But I think this is a team. The West. The West is going to be a log jam anyway. So whoever comes out of there is not necessarily a real contender for the conference. Even though if you make it to the championship game, you got a chance to win it. But when you just sitting on paper, you're gonna see all these West Division teams kind of clump together because I don't think nobody's head and shoulders above anybody else. Next up is Bethune-Cookman. I had them down for 2.5 wins on the season. Um, and all their wins, all their conference wins are all their conference games are toss ups. They have a tough non-conference slate with 3 games on the road to open up the season. 2 FBS games and the MEAC champs, and then you get Edward Waters at home to open up your home schedule. You want to make that an automatic win, but this team did lose to Clark last year, so you just never know. Everything else, I have them for 3 toss-ups, so that gives them like 1.5 conference wins. Um, two to be on the safe side, which is pretty much where they've been. So you see, saying like 2 and 6. Um, you know, they got a decent non-division draw. You get Grambling, Pine Bluff, and Southern. But you got to go to Jackson State, you got to go to Bama State, and you get FAMU in Orlando. So those games are your top division teams, and they're all away from home. Alabama and them and Valley are your only 2 home division matchups. But I don't really feel a lot of confidence in this team, so I had them at plus 8,000. That puts them at I lost it. Uh, 8,000 puts them at 1.2%. I mean, obviously, how they say on Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance? There's a chance, but it's very, very slim. They're probably the best of the worst. They brought in a lot of transfers, so this team could change on a dime. But they did the same thing last year, and it takes them a while to get going, and they don't necessarily get blowed out in games, which is definitely a good factor. But I don't see them getting a lot of wins. Next up is FAMU, and this is a team that I think can swing so many directions. I had them down for 8 wins because I still think this is a solid team. I mean, obviously they closed out the season very, very rough, but I do think the talent is there. Of course, like a lot of these teams, quarterback is going to be a question. Defensively, they're going to be, hopefully, there'll be more of that dark cloud defense than they were partly cloudy, like we used to say last season. So, if they can get back to that and that running game, which I think is going to be a huge factor for this team, I wouldn't sleep on this team. Um, with the backs they have, um, that helps you so much being able to run the ball. So, if they can run the ball, that gives your quarterback a chance to grow up. You got weapons in the receiving core. Your offensive line is always solid. Uh, Defensively, you can not take as long to get going. Um, this team will be in the mix. I mean, obviously they're top 3 in the division, which 3 out of top 3 out of 6. That don't sound like much, but they have 2 teams they basically have to go through. I have one of those games as a toss up, and I have one of those games as an L. They do get Bama State at home and Jackson State at home, so if you're looking for some magic, that would be the place where it is. But I have them as I have Jackson State as a loss for them, and I have Bama State as a toss up. So this is a team that can be 6-2. I don't really know about 7-1 because I'm not quite sure the team is in that position. So they may drop a couple of games that they shouldn't. But I don't really think they're gonna drop that kind of game like they did last year. Um, I have them at plus 2,400, which is like a 4% chance. That can swing higher. Because I may be overrating these guys, but I still do believe in this team. Um, but we'll see. Um, like I said, at a certain point, everybody's kind of just jammed up together. Grambling, I had them at 6.5 wins. Um, of course, they draw Jackson State, um, Bethune, and Alabama and them in non-conference. Um, all 3 of those games are not at the other team, so they 2 home games on the neutral site. They have 3 neutral site games this season, only 2 true conference road games. and everything else is at home. Um, I have them, with quite a few toss-ups. I have Pine Bluff as their only for sure win. Um, there is a possibility for this team to kind of make an upswing, but they have some huge shoes to fill on defense. Um, Offensively, they have some shoes to fill out. So I think they did a pretty good job addressing some of those problems in the portal. But right now, early, without games, it's tough to really put a team somewhere when they are kind of in that rebuild. They may be on the top side of the rebuild, but they are still in a rebuild. Um, so I put them at plus 3,800, which give them like a 2.5% chance. If I was to do that for the division, I would actually probably put them closer to that to the top. I really think the division is gonna be a log jam anyway. So you never know with the West. I wouldn't even want to put odds on the West because anybody can win it. It don't take but a couple games to get there. If you can have a better record in those 5 games than everybody else, that gives you at least an opportunity for tiebreakers. Now, obviously, if go 5-0 and 0-3 and out of the division, the other team go 5-1. I mean, excuse me, 4-1 and like 3-0 in the East Division, they're gonna go to the championship over you. So those games still matter, but for the sake of tiebreakers and things, you want to win those division games for sure. And so, if anything, I give Grambling. I probably give Grambling better odds in those conference games. Um, so there's always a chance for something to happen in the division. Next up is Jackson State. They're the odds-on favorite to win by pretty much everybody. Nah, just for the sake of this argument, I really started to put this way higher, but I put it at minus 100, which is like a 50% chance. Obviously, this is the odds-on favorite to win. If you put money on them to win, you're not gonna win much money unless you put like a lot of money on it. But because I have them at 10 wins, and that's basically winning every game but the FBS game, which I have to sit there and look more, but you obviously playing Southern Miss, you want them to beat those guys. I always had that feeling that when you go somewhere like that, strange things are going to happen to prevent you from that. But in conference play, I don't have them with any toss ups or any losses. So this one is probably the easiest one to factor in. They are the odds on favorite. They're going to be the favorite coming out of the meet today. They're going to be pretty much everybody's favorite in their preseason polls and stuff. So, this one was simple to figure out. And this one was too. I had Valley at plus 50,000, which is like a 0.2% chance. I have them for 1.5 wins, and I have Lincoln as their only win. So I'm projecting them to not win a conference game. They have one toss up in conference play, that's Bethune-Cookman, which is on the road. So it probably is a toss up. Is a toss up probably leaning more to a loss because this team, they're all new and they lost all their playmakers and they lost their key contributors on defense. So with a new coach and basically a whole new team, and the team obviously had a rough season last season. It's tougher to pencil them anywhere other than here because you lose your quarterback, you lose I think your top 2 running backs, you lose you lose your top tight end, you lose your top wide receiver. And your offense did not do well at all last season anyway, and you lose these guys. And some of these guys were legitimate all conference guys. So you're not losing nobody's that put up numbers because they played for a bad team. You losing guys who really were contributors and really could play on other people's teams. You just didn't have enough of those guys and enough consistency to get wins. And this is a typical, Valley schedule. They have a couple FCS games on the road. You do open up with Southern at home, which is a non-conference game, but you know I think this is the earliest home game Valley's had in a long time. But in conference play, there's not a lot of optimism there. Of course, I would love for Coach Buckley and his guys to prove me wrong, but right now it's really tough to say. Especially when you're not there day in and day out. And right now, it's not much to really go off of other than the spring. So you like to see those odds get better, but right now they're the longest the longest shot out of everybody. Um, Next up is a team that I think you're gonna see wildly um, forecasted all over the place. Um, I'm trying to hedge my bets because I don't really know how this team is going to come together, and that's Purdue. I did have them at 6.5 wins. Um, they have a lot of toss. They have a lot of toss ups. They have right now they just because I don't really know, I kind of have them as a two or three team, two or really probably two in the division, just because I don't think everybody else has a lot of questions too, and I always defer to champs early, so that's why I kind of had them at two. But I can see them being a team to make a run. It's going to all hinge on this early portion of the schedule. Of course, you open up at Texas Southern. That's a huge game. You get Grambling in the neutral site, and then you get Alcorn and Southern on the road. So your first four games are division games, and all four of them are away from home. Now, they did win at Alcorn, I believe, the year before. They won at Southern in 23. So, and they won at Texas Southern in 23. So these are not places that they can't win. They could easily, if this team comes together, they could go 4-0 in that stretch and have the division in a chokehold. Or they could start slow because it's gonna, maybe guys aren't gelling, and they could beat 1-3 or even 2-2 and be chasing. So playing, with Prairie View, they play so many division games early in the season. You kind of already know where you're going to be at by the time you get to like your third or fourth conference game. Just like last year, by mid-season, they already knew that they were in chase mode. So that first game is always vital, and that's why I had them at plus 2100, which is a 4.5% chance. In the division, I would give them a higher chance because, like I said, I wanna buy into a lot of what's going on, but I'm not really, but I'm from Missouri, and I like for people to show me. If you feel that way, and more power to you. But for me right now, I gotta see it, and if I'm proven wrong, I'll be the first one to give you your props. Next up is Southern. I have Southern for 8 wins, and that can go a lot of different ways. They have a few toss ups. They have a couple games I have as W's that could easily be toss ups. This team, not necessarily a dominant team. I think the defense is still going to be solid. You're returning one of your top linebackers. You're returning your best defensive lineman, one of the best defensive linemen in the conference. You got returning guys in the secondary. There's not as many holes on the defensive line as there was on the defense as a unit compared to what there was last year. So I think this team is going to be a little bit ahead of the curve on defense. Offense, you're getting a guy who started the last two regular season games. Hopefully, this team can be more consistent at quarterback. You have some talent at receiver. You got talent at tight end. The offensive line it is solid. They made some big changes last season. The O line got better. The biggest question mark for Southern is running back. They brought in some guys, but that's a position that if you had to throw a bunch of guys back there, somebody can get the job done. So Southern's gonna run the football, so somebody's gonna have to do it. But to me, consistency at quarterback and special teams are gonna make or break this team, especially early in the season. Um, which is where a lot of their L's and tougher games come at. Um, but I think that they're slightly ahead of the rest of the division. Not enough to, put them so far ahead of everybody, but they got a slight edge. I have them at plus 1800, which is like a 5% chance. I don't really think they're a true conference contender yet, but they do have enough to win the division and go to the championship game. Um, Again, if you can turn out great in your division, then you're good. Then you're good. They draw a pretty tough non-division slate. They got Jackson State, FAMU, and then Bethune. So you could easily drop those two of those games, and find yourself in a tough spot, needing to win needing to win your other six games to even have to take the division. So there's some some wiggle room up and down for Southern. There's nothing concrete, but I think they do have the best chance right now out of everybody in the division to come out on top. Next up is Texas Southern. I had them at 6 wins. They finished surprisingly third. I mean, obviously, as those guys, it wasn't a surprise, but to people like me, it was. I thought they played better down the stretch, even with a lack of a passing attack. They were still physical on defense, and they ran the ball extremely well. I think it's going to kind of be the same formula. Um, they have some games. They have some manageable games. You start off with Valley and Pine Bluff, Grambling, your first three conference games and Alcorn. All those games are, two toss ups and 2 wins basically. Um, you can come out of there in a good spot. Before you close out, you close out a little bit tougher. Obviously, you open up a Prairie View, you throw that in that mix. Your first 5 games are Prairie View, at Valley, Pine Bluff, at Grambling, and Alcorn. So you do have some games in there. Three or 5 games on in your first 5 games of toss ups. So, those can lean either way depending on how things go. I think that this team is going to be a factor in the division. I had them at plus 3,500 for the conference. We like a 2.7% chance of winning. They close out at Bama State, at Southern, and then Alabama and then at home. So that's a tough close to your schedule. So you kind of, it's not impossible which if you know how they matched up with Southern the last 3 or 4 years, they probably should have beat them 4 years in a row, but they lost 2 of those games for whatever reason. But they do feel like they can win that game, so I think that can be a game that can put them in the mix, in the hunt, even over the top. I like Texas Southern. I think they're going to be a team who can be a dark horse. They still have a lot of questions to me, just in terms of consistency. But they are going to be a solid team. And finally, it's Pine Bluff. Um, I have them at plus 40,000. Now, I really could have put them lower than Valley because they lost even more guys in Valley. Um, and they just continually lost guys, but um, they do have non-conference two games against lower division teams, and then an FBS game and FCS game. Um, Conference play, they get FAMU and Southern at home. They get Alcorn and Memphis. They got to go to Prairie View. They got to go Bama State. They got to go Bethune, and they get Grambling at home. I really don't have them. I only have them with one toss-up game in conference. Um, they're probably gonna have to, if they're probably gonna have to win a game on the road to pick up something, because their home games are pretty tough. But they didn't win a conference game on the road last season with one of their better teams, so one of their better offenses in quite some time. Now, I don't really see that again, but um, they have a 0.25% chance. I had to get them something, and so that's why I put them there. So with that being said, man, again, entertainment purposes only. Don't really do anything with this. Ain't gonna really get you nothing. But we're gonna come back closer to the season and probably revamp these odds as we learn a little bit more about these teams. Just wanted to set a baseline to kind of know where we could go up and down. Uh, the one we do closer to the season, I'll stand on that one. But this one right now is just a practice run. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC Seawell signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.